and Tom Brady appeared on it and was asked. It was kind of fun. He was asked, when it got down to it, those last 2 or 3 or 4 teams that you were interested in, how did that go?
One of the teams, they weren't interested at the very end. I was thinking, you're sticking with that mother.
All right, who's he dogging? So Tom wanted to go to a team. Who was he dogging? Now, let's just run through it. Many people think it's Garoppolo. It's not Garoppolo. Garoppolo just been to a Super Bowl. Okay, Garoppolo and Brady have the same agent, a really nice guy, smart guy. I know him, Don Yee. You're not going to dog Garoppolo on television because Don Yee, Garoppolo, and Brady, there's a commonality there. That's not who he's dogging. Trust me on that. You could say the Chargers, because there were a lot of rumors with the Chargers. Well, the Chargers, remember Tom said, stick with somebody. They weren't sticking with somebody. They were moving off Phillip Rivers, and they wanted Brady. In fact, in a weird moment of fate, I actually called the Chargers and told them Brady signed with Tampa. And their reaction was, oh, damn, let me call Don Yee. It wasn't the Chargers. It wasn't Tennessee. There were rumors about Tennessee because Tannehill had just beaten Brady and was red hot. And you would look silly saying, that guy, he just beat you and played well. It wasn't the Colts because they weren't sticking with anybody. They had just acquired Phillip Rivers, but they were interested in Brady. He wasn't really that interested in them. And then there's the Saints. That was talked about. Drew and Tom are very respectful, about as respectful as, competitors can be. They really like each other. He would never say that about Drew Brees. It's also not Derek Carr because Brady wasn't interested facing Patrick Mahomes twice a year with a Raiders bad roster. And he's not, West Coast was always a challenge, and that got in the way for the Chargers, too. It was West Coast, right? It felt like too far west, and they have a bad roster, first year in Vegas, Gruden. So Tom Brady liked 3 teams. This I know. Tampa, where he signed, the Chargers, he liked their weapons, he liked their roster, but it was West Coast, and that hurt, and Chicago. He was into Matt Nagy, like Tampa, good enough offensive line, number 1 receiver, Allen Robinson, good defense, big city. You figuring out who it is? It's Mitch Trubisky. He really considered 3 teams. He considered Tampa, the Chargers, and Chicago. He wasn't going to go to San Francisco. Garoppolo, Don Yee there. He'd just been to a Super Bowl. The Colts, it's Peyton Manning's team. Chargers, Raiders, mostly out west. Tom wanted to stay on the coast he's been playing on. It is a shot at Mitch Trubisky, who, for the record, is now a backup. So what Tom is saying as the GOAT to a now backup is a reasonable thing to say. Wasn't Tannehill, not Derek Carr. Derek Carr and Tannehill can play. Those guys can play. Garoppolo, by the way, for all the criticism he gets, we know Kyle Shanahan's a great coach. Kyle Shanahan's won like 18 to 20% of his games when Garoppolo doesn't start. Garoppolo can play. Tom was with him for 3 years. He can play. He got to a Super Bowl. His only year is standing up in San Francisco. He got to a Super Bowl. So it is Trubisky. That's the answer. And that's the truth. Joy with the news.
No. Turn on the news. This is the Herd.
So let's go to 1981. And let's look at who has been the face of the league. So in 1981 to 83, Magic had a title with Kareem. Magic really helped the rebirth of the NBA. David Stern, the new commissioner's like, let's promote the players. Magic was the face of the NBA. It was his league. Larry Bird also came in about the same time, and then Larry Bird wrestled it away from him for about a 3-year period, mid-'80s, where Larry was winning MVPs. Celtics were giving the Lakers a hard time. Magic wrestled it back from him at the end of the 80s to close out the decade. Magic now, the hook shot and winning championships and MVPs. So the 80s was Magic and Larry's league. There's no dispute. As good as Isaiah Thomas can be, it was Magic and Larry's league. They were the most marketable. One was East Coast, one was West. One was a Celtic, one was a Laker. It was really a great time. I remember it well. It really felt like in sports, I look back and I think that's the beginning of the NBA for most people watching our show. That really feels like the beginning for most people under 60 watching the show. So it was Magic and Bird. Then we go to the 90s. Well, you know what happened there. It was Michael Jordan's league. From about 90 to 98, even when Michael briefly left for about a year and a half, it's still Michael's league. Only people winning it because Michael wasn't there. It was Michael's league. And then for about a 7-8 year period, like 99 to 2007, when centers mattered, it went Duncan, Shaq, Duncan. That was Tim Duncan came out of college and was completely polished his first day in the league. And Shaq was the big personality. They were opposite human beings, right? One the big personality, one very reticent, but they were the faces of the league. And then for a brief time, the great late Kobe Bryant, for about a 2-3 year period, 2008, 2010, went to finals, won a couple of them with Pau Gasol. He was the face of the league. From that until today, it's been LeBron's league. 10 years with a tip of the cap to Steph Curry, who in the later years kind of tried to wedge in there, but it's LeBron's league. So I want you to think about that first of all. 40 years, 7 people. 5 of the 7 are very engaging personalities. Magic, and Michael was glamorous, and Shaq and Kobe and LeBron, and style and personality and the great smile, and they embraced it. Bird, feisty and combative. Duncan, reluctant. So it does prove, like Kevin Durant's personality, he's a little combative and feisty. So is Bird. You could do that. He can be sometimes withdrawn. So is Duncan. You can be face of the league. But it's harder. It is harder. Market size, again, is not everything. Duncan was the face of the league in San Antonio. So now let's get to Kevin Durant. Could he be the face of the league? Well, it's interesting. In his 3 stops, I'd argue he's never been the face of the team. In Oklahoma City, what was his frustration? Management sided with Westbrook. As wrong as they were, and they were really wrong, Kevin got frustrated with the coach and the GM who wouldn't confront Westbrook, who was very difficult to play with. Kevin was called at one point Mr. Unreliable. Westbrook was more popular. Then he goes to Golden State, and he was their best player, Finals MVP. But the culture was created by Steph. Steph is the Bay Area. It was Steph's team. And then he goes to Brooklyn. Okay, it's his team. Well, not really. The last 2 weeks, it's been his team. But in the regular season, the hottest the Nets got was when KD got hurt and Harden took over. And weren't we on this show saying, man, Harden really is a valuable player. He really is. I came on and said, I always saw him as a scorer. James Harden's actually really valuable. He's a really good distributor. He's trying on defense. It's hard to be the face of the league when 3 different times you haven't necessarily been the face of your team. And we do this all the time. We confuse brilliantly talented with the face of something or the culture setter. No, Kevin Durant is the most effortless, brilliantly gifted scorer in basketball. And I would argue that's probably been the last 8 years. Maybe I'm wrong on the timeline. Maybe it's 10, maybe it's 7, maybe it's 6. But he's a little withdrawn. He's a little combative. He's a little feisty. And I'm not really sure he really wants to be that. Kevin Durant this year and next, as long as he's healthy, will be the most gifted scorer in basketball. But don't confuse that with being the face of something, the most important something. I don't think right now the NBA necessarily needs a face of the league. I think they're getting closer to the NFL. I think what's ironic here is the NFL was always very corporate. Actually, it's borrowing some NBA stuff. Let's let our guys celebrate. Guys are getting shoe deals. Star quarterbacks having a